Welcome to the Effortless Mindfulness Podcast. I'm Locke Kelly, and here I share talks and deep dialogues with leading experts in the field of meditation, psychology, and neuroscience. Together we'll explore how everyday people like you and me can live an awakened life of clarity and compassion. You'll also find micro meditations at the end of every podcast episode. If you want to try more of these, you can go to lockekelly.org and find the new wellness and meditation app called Mindful Glimpses and try the 2-week free trial. There you'll experience immediate benefits because the love and peace we are all seeking is already here within us and can be accessed anywhere, anytime. Welcome. Today I'm really have the pleasure of talking to Scott Barry Kaufman and look forward to diving in deeply into some topics I'm sure many of you will be interested in.
Well, thanks for having me on your show, Locke, and I wish it all the best.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So, we've talked before on your podcast, and I've read some of your work, certainly your recent book and one that is called Choose Growth. And the thing that has interested me is the way that you bring together psychology and consciousness. And so I'd love to start off by just asking you a little bit about a topic that you talk about that you call the transcender, or what's meant by transcendence.
Usually interviews don't start with the pinnacle of human consciousness.
Well, that's what,
then go from there.
That's our direct approach.
That's how you roll. I do view transcendence as a state of consciousness, so I'm glad that you made that link. It's not necessarily, it's not a destination of achievement that you arrive at. You know, some people have this, what's called the I'm enlightened and you're not effect. You know, in psychology, there's this effect called I'm enlightened, you're not effect, where people will take do some spiritual retreats and then they leave it having a puffed up ego, like they've reached nirvana and no one else has. So I tend to view it as more horizontal than vertical. It's a real connection, a deep connection with the world, and a reduction in your attention that you put on yourself. It's not that you completely lose your sense of self, so you don't even know who you are anymore. Who am I? What's going on? No, it's not like you completely lose your sense of self. I think there's a great integration there between self and world with transcendence. In fact, where you are so integrated that you don't need to focus on your independent self-concept as much. But it's not as though your self doesn't exist. I never really understood that.
Although I noticed in your book that you do Maslow, who's the person you're really an expert in. He does say that the transcendent experience has this sense of a loss of time and a reduction of ego.
Yeah.
So there is this gap,
That's
at
right.
least a gap. And I know that we both agree that that's not the place to stop. But I think for many people, there's a transition from trying to achieve being a strong, healthy, positive self with the greatest effort, and then some either spontaneous peak experience or meditation or psychedelics can show us that that which we thought was the center of self is fluid, or there's a kind of a transcending of that, and that some people do stop in that gap of no self and try to set up camp as if I'm nobody, what kind of tea would you like? All tea is the same, but what he does talk about and what you talk about in your chapter on called Transcender is that that's a transition to this transcendent and yet embodied horizontal way of living.
Yeah, I like that way of thinking about it in terms of a way of living. Well, it's a way of being,
Yeah.
quite frankly.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's something that's out of reach for anyone. And I know you don't either. I mean, that's your whole thing, is that it's like returning to your natural state, right?
Yes.
Not adding anything on. And that's actually how Maslow thought about it as well. He says that about self-actualization. It's removing. It's not adding.
Right. Yeah. It's removing that. It's almost like if we think of it developmentally, because that's one way you could see him, at least as a starting point, talking about, moving through stages of life, almost like, the sense of dependence as a child, and then you develop an independence, and you develop this independent school age, whether you call it secondary process thinking, as Freud called it, or system two, or some thought-based
Right.
independence. And then we're actually adding to the model of saying, okay, that's not the end. You can function in the world. Now, how do you be? What's that? Rather than, becoming a doer.
Yes. Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah. You always blow my mind. You have like a whole language to you, the way you talk. It's and then I have to like translate it in my head to like the language I've used.
Yeah.
You've got like the Locke Kelly language. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm pulling from a lot of the things you've studied, but then trying to synthesize, different cultures and wisdom traditions, and both psychotherapy, psychology, and developmental psychology and positive psychology. Yeah. How do we look at this diamond? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you have a background in clinical. Do you have a background in clinical psychology?
Yes, yeah. I've been a psychotherapist for 40 years. Yeah.
Yeah, so the amount of experience, I know that you've been a psychotherapist, so you must have
Yeah.
gotten a degree in clinical. That was a stupid question, but you never know. You never know. There are some psychotherapists
That's
with
true.
like no training.
Yeah.
But you must have collected so many experiences in your life. Like you've heard so many stories, and being able to synthesize that with your own theories of consciousness, or just it's just such a great unique position for you to be in. I don't mean to turn the interview around on you, but I'm a bit fascinated by you.
Yeah. Yeah. So these, but this is I love Maslow's language, and that developmental, what he calls the be values, right? The values of being become the more
Yes.
important as we, what I call, and what,
Yeah.
from Ken Wilber talks about waking up and growing up. So it's not just about waking
Yeah.
up, but what is this continual growing up that actually, the values of the independent thinker and doer and worker is so focused on doing that it's fascinating when you realize that being isn't the prior condition, is actually what can integrate it all.
Yeah, yeah. The idea of the B dash anything is a fascinating framework for me, because I think it can apply to anything in life. Like he started to use it loosely as well, and I was like, well, you can call anything. There's a B flavor and a D flavor
Yeah,
to
yeah.
it. I feel like we need to explain this a little bit to the audience, maybe who aren't familiar with it. They might not even know what B means.
Right.
So B stands for being. And one of the first instances of it, which I saw him talking about, is in the context of love. You can have being love. You know, you can. A lot of people have like doing love, where they feel like the only thing that's worthy of love is when it's like on public display. You know, like, oh, I started my nonprofit, and here's my look at all I'm doing for the children in Africa. You know, like, aren't I a good person? Aren't I showing love? But you know, you can have being love, which is just during the course of your day, you know, when you encounter people, well, how do you show up to them? You know, like, do you have love as an adverb, as an attitude towards those you might not like, you know, towards those who you differ from politically, you know. So this being flavor, and then there's a deprivation form of it as well, right? Where you love is you use people only as a means to have your own sort of to get you up to a certain baseline that you want. So I think everything has a B flavor and a D flavor to it, and values do as well. You can have deficiency values. I think you can have values that are pure being, where there's no end, they're ends in themselves, and that's what Maslow meant by B values. So I just wanted to give a little more explanation
Yeah.
and context for what that means, and yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, in Buddhism, they talk about, you know, relative reality and ultimate reality. So there's a loving kindness that's, you could say, a small L loving kindness, and then there's the B value of loving kindness, which is discovered to already be naturally here. So it's not something you develop or that you try to achieve or try to even create, but if you go into your natural sense of perceiving from a kind of interconnected transcender dimension, you'll feel a loving kindness that is more like unconditional love, no conditions. There's just no conditions that keep you from this.
Well, that's a hard one for a lot of people to swallow.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I think Maslow and you and I are talking about is, you know, kind of stretching the map because it is hard if you're trained to believe that there's only certain things and the highest achievement is self-actualization, and that's even higher than others that are most, but there's no being there, there's just doing. Then you don't even have,
Right.
you've never been invited. And when you've had the experience, when I have students or people I talk to who say, well, I've had that experience, but I kind of dismissed it because I didn't know it was valuable.
Well, that's an interesting one. I wonder all the sorts of experiences we dismiss because we don't know that they're valuable, and all the ones that we think are valuable that aren't really valuable to us.
Yes, that's right.
Evolution is a sneaky one,
Yeah,
and it doesn't really care about our happiness.
that's right. This kind of transcendence and immanence, or transcending and including, is that just because we've experienced this being doesn't mean there's not this animal DNA drive quality of our brain and our body that is now not going to be chugging along as it was. It still will like do an immediate wanting and grasping after food, and and then it's the integration of who is this all occurring to ultimately becomes the possibility. Is there another dimension of who am I, rather than that dualistic mind that is about survival or higher mental values.
I really like this idea of that we have a symphony of selves that, like, Jim Fadiman talks about in his new book with Jordan Gruber. Yeah, and I was actually wondering how you think about the symphony of selves idea, and how we can tap into on demand transcendent states of consciousness, because it seems like there are some moods we get into where it's harder to just spontaneous, just, oh yeah, just be transcendent now. When you're like angry, when you're there, when you're lustful,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's hard to just,
Yeah.
just turn on the switch.
Strong. Yes. Well, certainly.
Let's be honest about humans.
Yeah. No. And even that, those drives that are so strong. So just to say about the, Fadiman and the Symphony of Selves, that's pretty much the psychotherapy that I've practiced for 40 years. So basically, I've stumbled into
Holy cow.
That same realization early on. And one of the ways I stumbled into it is from the kind of some of the more fundamentalist Buddhist idea that we got to get rid of the ego. There's no ego. Transcend it, kill it. It's illusion. And then even when I did experience this more transcendent, embodied, as soon as I got up off the cushion and walked around, it wasn't just one ego, it was different, many minds or mini me's would show up, and some of them would be manager types, and some of them would be, critics, and some of them would be shame-based parts, and some of them would be 12 years old, and some of them would be trying to get something, and others would be defending against, a part that was hurt. And so all of a sudden, these kinds of parts-based or subpersonality-based psychotherapies, I started saying, oh, well, there you go. There's people talking about it. Let's find out how these two go together. And much, the one that I've been working closely with, I don't know if you know, is Internal Family Systems with Richard Schwartz. So
love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
Okay. So, now we get to another theme that I was reading about in your Choose Growth, is talking about, many people know PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, but you also mention PTG, post-traumatic growth. So certainly, there's no way to deny or magically make trauma and pain and suffering of the human condition go away on the level of just transcending. So it's so important to take, to see what actually these traumatic parts are trying to communicate, what the protectors of them are, and what the actual experience here and now. Yeah. So maybe you say something about PTG and maybe help some people understand what you mean by that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for this opportunity to talk a little bit about that. It's a particular subset of the field of positive psychology. It has a very positive psychology flavor to it, because it's like, oh, let's see the positive and the negative. It's so positive psychology. But it's not just that. It's really, how can we create meaning even in the most challenging of circumstances, and it's really the recognition that certain things happen and you can't change them. And what did Irvin Yalom say? He said, "Give up hope for a new past."
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, along the lines of that, he said something with that sentiment. I don't know if it was those exact words, but and this notion that moving forward, knowing you can't change certain things, what do you do to maybe reprioritize your life, or maybe you can grow in various ways that you never even realized you could grow, and really being able to do that cognitive processing of the meaning making is an absolutely essential core part of that process. But it doesn't mean you can't have PTG and post-traumatic stress disorder at the same time, because you can.
Yeah.
They can work in parallel with each other. I don't mean to suggest that that you've somehow failed. If you have post-traumatic stress, if you get the post-traumatic stress disorder, not the growth, that like you failed the game
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah.
That's not what it's about. We're all dealing with our traumas in different ways,
Yeah.
and I think the idea is to transform intrusive rumination into productive rumination, and I'm sure you do that a lot with your clients.
Yeah.
Their lock. I
Yeah.
bet you know what I'm talking about.
I sure do. Yes. Yeah. And that, certainly with the PTSD, especially, using example of someone who's been, in a war zone where there's kind of chronic survival stimulation, that the sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight is on. It's not that the people are doing that. It's literally on the level of the nervous system, which is not just stress but overwhelm, is creating this kind of sense of sending the animal into, as the trauma was in a situation of survival, is now just on alert. And then from there, the almost like bottom up, working with body, the breath, the nervous system, the brain, the emotions, and then once there's a calming, what I've found, and Dick Schwartz as well, one of the reasons we started working together is that we realized that even people with complex trauma could access this transcendent self.
Wow. So
And they would say,
sorry, go on. You got me excited.
no, that's a good time for a wow. That is a wow. I mean, because it's kind of against a lot of the classical, you have to have a self, to be able to, deal with trauma,
Yeah.
which has been much of the kind of modern psychoanalytic belief. So this sense, I mean, so for me, it was like a client who had a experience, who was having suicidal feelings, said, where do you feel them? I feel them here in my throat. And, can you locate that? Yes. Okay. What is it saying? Why go on? Why not, just get out of this? And do you have another part of you that brought you here today and said, yeah, actually that's a little lower down. That's right here. And then asking the person, well, who's aware of these two parts? And she literally just opened and went, well, I am. And how do you feel toward those two parts? Well, I feel they both make sense. They both, I feel like they're both, trying to help me. And she just like went into this transcendent, timeless, embodied, and this is somebody who, had been hospitalized and lived in a halfway house and went to a day treatment program. And, she began this transcendent, which is why I think is what Maslow's talking about.
Yeah, I wish you were here right now to be part of this conversation, but the best I can do is channel him, and also give you my my own thoughts, which on transcendence, which might diverge from his. This idea of being able to step outside of your parts is a fascinating idea, and being able to look kind of bird's eye view at all of your parts, to me is a core part of a transcendence. It's also part of what Maslow calls dichotomy transcendence. And because we see lots of our parts in a war with each other that maybe aren't necessarily at war. That's just like the narrative we've told ourselves.
Yes. That's right. So that, when I hear that dichotomy transcendence, that's pretty much what people are using today in meditation, calling it non-duality. So non-duality means
That's cool. That's a great mapping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not either or, it can be both and it can be kind of the third point on the triangle. It's not either this or that, it's this third that's aware of both. That and the next
That's beautiful.
next move of that bird's eye view, which is kind of what I call deliberate mindfulness, is then there's a feeling of interconnectedness, so that you're not a detached observer as a transcendent witness, but that can be a first move of bird's eye, and then there's a feeling like ocean and wave, like, oh, wait a minute, I'm bigger, but each of these waves, I'm made of them. They're part of me. They're like they're not, to be gotten rid of. they're essential life that is part of my unique being.
Yeah, but I think there's an interesting question of what do you do with parts of yourself that you do want to go away?
That's a good question. Yeah.
Now, like I think that's a fair question.
Yes.
I don't believe that every single thing should be integrated.
No, that's
but
right.
it should be aware. You should be aware. I do think awareness is key.
Yes.
But not everything needs to be integrated. It's like, oh my God, I gotta integrate all that anger I have. Well, I mean, but also it's all tricky. It's all tricky. Humans are tricky because you can't. The more that you try to banish it from the kingdom, though, the stronger it gets.
That's right.
So that won't work.
No.
That won't work.
No.
So so trying to figure out this exactly what to do, what to do with your demons.
Yes.
Is a fascinating question in itself. I'd love to get some of your perspective on that from a non-duality point of view.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it is, again, interesting that it's how I was practicing, and then I met Dick Schwartz, and he has some good language for it that's more psychological, where he basically says there's no bad parts, that they're all trying to help you find love and safety. And so rather than either not getting rid of them or getting rid of them, you learn to unburden their burden, because they're carrying a burden of a worldview that thinks I've got to be angry, and in order to be safe, I've got to, criticize everyone or criticize myself. And then you say, well, thank you for trying so hard to help me be safe. Now, what is it you believe would happen if you relaxed or unburdened this role of needing to be so aggressive? And you say, well, I'm afraid that you'd be in danger. And well, what if there was a self that could protect and be wise and respond? What would you want to do then, and what would you let go of? And then this part literally will, like a subpersonality, start to say, well, yeah, I would love that. You'll still be part of the team. We'll need you but you can let go of that guard dog feeling that you feel you've been trying to help with or needed to do. Does that make sense to you?
Well, it's a game-changing way of thinking of things, and I do have some follow-up questions though. I'm a big do you like that way of being that I have there?
Yes.
But I got questions.
That's good. No, that's what we're doing. We're switching back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a conversation, in fact. Carl, I'm a big fan of the idea of unconditional positive regard that Carl Rogers talked about,
Yes.
and I incorporate that, and that's the course of my own practice. I'm starting a form of coaching called self-actualization coaching, and by the way, internal family systems theory is a part of my coaching program, but so is Carl Rogers' notion of unconditional positive regard. And I do think we can have unconditional positive regard for our own selves. But I do have a question about this idea of there are no bad parts. That's a tricky one. Is he saying that there are no from a perception labeling point of view? Is he saying kind of get rid of the labels that we're putting on things, so don't label anything as bad, or is he objectively saying there are no parts that are bad? I think those are two different
Yeah,
things.
I think they are.
And I really want to understand which one he's referring to, because I don't know if I would agree with him if depending on his answer to this question.
Yeah,
So I'm
I mean,
curious.
I think he and I have.
I'll channel Maslow and you channel Schwartz.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, I also have my own view, and he and I agree in a lot, and
I know.
the reason we talk together is because he's mapped out the parts, and I've kind of mapped out what he calls self, transcendent self, and so he hadn't mapped that
Beautiful.
out clearly or helped people know how to get into that.
Beautiful.
So, and then, certain things like he considers the parts to actually be inner people. And I'm not sure that they're inner people. I don't know what that like literally they're inner people. So there's things like that. So I would say that, that sense that there's no bad parts, my understanding is almost like Carl Rogers is starting from, well, you have unconditional positive regard for its essential intention. It's now, grown into a confused acting out part. So it's not that the acting out is good, but that the essential nature of the part needs to start with unconditional positive regard, and then when you do discover that those parts, like the inner critic. I mean, that's one of the classical things that I think there's so many varieties of attempts to, quiet the inner critic, ignore the inner critic. But this is like, well, the inner critic is trying to help you. It's just extreme. It's in an extreme role. And if you can approach it with unconditional positive regard, and then be curious, like you are, asking questions to the part, well, what is it that you're trying to attend? What are you afraid of? What do you think would happen if you weren't so extreme? Then if you can get a relationship, and it will be honest, it doesn't have to stay in that extreme role. It can relax and be part of the awake consciousness or the self nature that still has discriminating ability.
Is the idea there that they all have good intentions because some of them, like the ones that seem destructive, are actually really just defense mechanisms?
Yeah.
So in the sense they're trying to protect us
Yes.
from deep pain. Is that the idea?
Yeah.
Behind why they have good intentions? Because I don't know if they all have good intentions, to be honest.
Okay.
That's a very Pollyannish way of thinking about all of ourselves.
Well, but if you approach it, but again, if you can accept unconditional positive regard as the
Yes.
okay, if you stay in
Yes.
that, you stay in that view, we would call it a orientation or a view or a transcendent, like
Yes.
unconditional positive regard B value with in other words, the natural quality. Now you go as that to some part that's rageful or angry or mean,
Right.
mean or something like that, or hateful, hatred, meanness, those kind of things. And you really go with that. What do you find?
Right. Yes. So I think you can put a lens of unconditional positive regard on things that don't have good intentions, I guess is what I'm saying. How would Carl Rogers form a therapeutic relationship if he had a serial killer in his office? Right. First of all, he'd probably put up a gate, a wall between him and the serial killer. But I'm taking a very extreme example, but I do think that unconditional positive regard lends to change because you have real deep acceptance of what's there. But as he often said, it doesn't mean you don't want to change the thing. It doesn't mean that you just blindly turn everything into a positive.
No, it's not a Pollyannish or it's not a D value of, it's not a small value of, there's no bad parts, like it, so then if you start, so let's take the serial killer or somebody like that. So the view from symphony
is Hannibal.
Hannibal, what would be the symphony of selves? From the symphony of selves view, first of all, even before we get to unconditional positive regard, the person is not a serial killer. There's a part of him that's a serial killer. So other parts might be nice to his mother and his, have friends, and certainly, Hannibal has, is a aficionado of art, and, was able to organize a museum in Italy and be a connoisseur of, other parts of him are, and then
he's very good at culinary cooking, especially brains.
Brains.
Sorry, this is getting dark.
Yeah. This is good. But you see, we're dealing with trauma. We're dealing with not just, we're talking about transcendence, and then in order to do that, I think it's great that you and I can, let's apply that to the most extreme cases. And
a little dark humor.
Yeah, dark humor.
A little dark humor for you folks.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I like to take extreme cases because they prove to be exceptions that prove the rule sometimes.
Yeah, that's right. So if you go, kind of back it up to the middle, taking that view that there is, so here's our summary as we start to bring this all together. So what if there is a transcendent dimension of human beings that is a being that, regardless of how the conditioning or the multiple selves have developed, that could be, whether it's late in life as a developmental stage, or maybe earlier, perhaps having done certain amount of growth, start to recognize and access it. Now realize, now there's a symphony of selves, so I'm not, just a bad at this, and a person who can't do anything right, or, that shame-based part, feel worthless, or there's a part of me that feels worthless. Oh, okay, where's that? Okay. Part of me that, is snappy at people, or something like that. It's like, and then it's like, okay, so that's a part, so that's a protect. So then how do those two go together? And especially now, how do we heal both the protective parts, the ego defenses, and the hurt, traumatized, younger parts from the more transcendent self, given that can't be reduced to being one thing or another, because so that's my question to you. That was a big, long question, huh?
Well, you can't, right. Yeah, no, it's beautiful, beautiful. You have a great mellifluous way of speaking. One approach that we know does not work is to fight those sides. It just doesn't work. Like you see it in political discourse today. Since when does it work when two people come together with different political ideas and they immediately start punching each other? Well, how is that solving any of the issues in the world? So one thing we know doesn't work is quite frankly struggling against those sides, and beating yourself up for adding extra layers of self-critical aspects is not moving in the direction of growth. So let's first start with what isn't the direction of growth before we figure out what is the direction of growth. So, saying like, okay, well, I hate that I have this grumpy side of myself. I wish I didn't have this grumpy side of myself, and I can't help it. He comes out. Whenever I talk to an annoying person, I can't help it because the person's annoying. So it brings out of me my grumpy side. And but damn it, it's I hate myself for it. Okay, all of that is like, whoa, that's a lot of extra stuff you've put on top
Yeah.
of the fact you have this
Yeah.
side of yourself that you don't particularly love. But like, but that's a lot of extra fighting you just
Right.
did with it, and it doesn't even care
Right.
about all of that. To be frank,
Yeah.
that side of yourself is listening to all that other stuff and being like, yeah, whatever. It's being grumpy at what you're saying. So you're not helping the grumpy
right.
side at all by saying that.
Yeah, and that is in some ways, you could say, a great majority of intelligent, high growth level, successful people's approach psychologically.
Yes,
Basically,
agreed.
they approach it the way they would a problem in the world. Okay, there's this problem. I got to deal with it. Well,
Agreed.
just stop doing it. Well, I have a bad behavior. Well, what's wrong with you? Stop being grumpy. Look, and then the next level of smart is cognitive behavior or replacing, okay, well, just replace your
Right.
grumpiness with be really nice, smile at everyone. Hi, how are you? Good. Okay, now feel it, but don't let them know it. Like change the behavior,
Yes.
and then all within all of that psychological, mental, prior to transcendence, it's all going to get you a little bit far because you haven't totally given up. But, there's another option that we're kind of exploring that isn't this mental battle or replacement or,
Right.
right?
Yes, we are. But sometimes, I don't know, maybe you can replace. To me, it's so much of life is about where you put your attention. That's not a profound thing. It's a profound thing I've said, but it's not like I'm the first one to have to say such a thing.
Right.
But I do think there's something there, and maybe the replacement's not the right word, but in a sense, like being aware of the power of shifting your attention to a different aspect of a person,
Yeah.
or a different feature of the world, can have really profound effects on the priority of yourself and which sides are going to be triggered
Right.
and be more potent at any one time. That's the approach I take.
Yeah.
To your question that you asked.
Yeah.
Is this along the lines of how you're thinking as well?
Yeah, but I'm saying that I think that it does have positive effects. It is good, but it remains in what Maslow calls the dichotomy. It still is one part positive, assuming there's one part negative, and assuming that the good side can win or that we can replace. So I think it's better than not doing it. It can have positive effects. And yet, when you discover the transcendent function that sees both the part that is grumpy and the part that's trying to be positive and replace it, and then sees the root of why you're grumpy, what's the part that feels unseen or something like that, as a third from this bigger view, then all three of those parts in the symphony don't have to keep, like Freud's billiard balls idea that the id is in charge and the ego is like a billiard ball that has to knock it out of the center. That there can be this bigger field of that transcends the dichotomy or the trichotomy.
Yes. Well, of course, I'm very much in agreement with that. But I maybe I'm not articulating what I'm thinking that well. But there is a transcendent self that, when it looks objectively, even if it doesn't label certain ways of being as the bad part, because I agree, and we both clearly agree that all that extra layer of judgment and labeling is not doing any favors. I think there still is a sort of transcendent state where you acknowledge that certain sides of yourself are not going to be as productive in the moment in fostering a relationship with someone, in terms of adaptively moving through the world and reaching your goals, in life, like, so I think that we can still be aware of that, and think of things in a way that changes the way that those parts are seeing the world. You're not trying to change the part itself, but I'm saying your attention can play a really and your framing can play such a powerful role in communicating with those parts we don't like, or those parts that we don't think are being productive, to kind of have a clearer lens or a broader lens on what's really happening. This is what I'm trying to articulate.
Yeah,
I
no,
hope
that
I'm making
makes
any sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense on a bunch of levels. That in general, it's good, and as you said, that's not either or. It's not like transcend or
Right.
or you're
Right.
you're caught in the you're caught in the illusion or something. It's like, no, we're all caught in the illusion, and there's a transcendent that's aware of the illusion.
Yeah.
So as you said, it's almost like, where are you aware of that self-improvement or that positive character development? Where are you aware? Where you're doing it from can be incrementally different. If you're in the middle of it and you're fighting it, like, I shouldn't have the ice cream. I want the ice cream. I
Yes.
shouldn't have the ice cream. Then we all know the result there.
Humans have such a fear of the unknown. They have such a fear of things they can't control, things they don't understand. And I think that applying that same lens we've been talking about within our own selves and applying that to others that we're engaging with in the world is so important, because there are times where I talk to certain people, family members, I won't mention anything beyond that, who I get frustrated with.
Yeah.
And I love them, but I get frustrated with them. And but then if I really sort of force myself to just sit back non-judgmentally and just really understand where the words are coming from, and really understand where, what the real intentionality is, kind of reverse engineer it a little bit and understand it a little bit more. I soften a bit,
Right.
and don't take it so personally. So much of human suffering is taking things personally.
Yeah.
In a way, but also, I'll pause there.
Yeah. So I mean, and it's like, so there, it's beautiful what you're describing is like, if I realize the first level of reactivity, and then I step back and pause, and then what you've done is, the question for me is like, okay, who stepped back? Where did you step back into? Who's the one who's now viewing what you a minute ago were identified with that was being reactive? Doesn't mean that reactivity has gone away, but there's a bigger transcendent view that now softens.
Yeah.
Softens means, to me, comes into, and both has soft feelings for yourself and for the other person, right?
Yeah, I like the non-duality approach.
Yeah.
The more I learned about it from you, I gotta say, you're my main teacher. Did you know that?
I did not know.
I think I've told you that before. I think you told me that when it comes to my understanding of non-duality,
Okay.
and my own practice of it, you are my mentor.
Okay.
So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and it is very compatible with my own philosophy of transcendence.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful because it's, and that's why I so appreciate your clarity and just the way you put things into words too, the way you both use the stepping stones of people like Maslow and a lot of the psychologists that I admire, and then you put it into simpler, clearer language, and make it practical. And it's so important to have, both the non-duality to have the clarity of the psychological and basic human suffering and trauma and all of that, those research and studies. Like one, I know you summarized a study that talked about people who did have PTG that were able to post-traumatic growth, that some of the four, there was some researcher that mentioned the four qualities, and one of them was having a positive view of the future and having confidence that you could achieve that. So those things, counterbalance and bring the psychological into a little, sometimes people say, well, be in the present, just be in the moment. Don't focus on the past. Don't go into the future. But somebody who's depressed is caught in the present. And if you're in the now, you're in the transcendent view that includes past, present, and future. So you need a view that there is a future, that you have been able to resolve things in the past and get through them. And that kind of research shows that, how important that is, yeah?
I would say, I'll put it this way, not defining your whole self by your traumas is so essential to growth. But so many people have a lot of trouble with that, have a lot of trouble moving past that. They are a wounded human. And I think it's just so essential to recognize that you aren't anything. I should say. You aren't any one thing.
Yes,
you aren't any one thing.
That's right.
That's the general principle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Beautiful. Well, that's a beautiful way to end with that. With that.
I always leave my conversations with you very intellectually stimulated, as well as spiritually stimulated. Yeah. Until I feel like there's a real integration of ideas when I talk to you. So I really appreciate you inviting me on your show, Ak.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here, and for just gives me an opportunity to really connect with you. I really so enjoy your being and your enthusiasm and your like delight that you bring from your intelligence, and then all of a sudden the beautiful wow jumps out to be delightfully surprised at your naturalness.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
As a kid, I had difficulty focusing. Later on, I found out that I had some form of ADHD. I struggled early in school, and so the best way I found to focus were by listening to music, doing art projects, and particularly playing sports. Once I learned effortless mindfulness later in life, I discovered how to access a new way of focusing that changed my life. I decided I wanted to find out what this was all about and how to share it with others. In most forms of mindfulness, we can make the initial move from our distracted mind to a one-pointed focus by concentrating or paying attention to an object. This can help our brain by strengthening our prefrontal cortex and help our body by creating a certain type of calm. However, for those who have difficulty learning to meditate, or those who want to go to the next stage of mindfulness, here's a different way to begin. Even people who have very good ability to concentrate can still burn out in such a busy world. Paying attention all day long can actually be a significant contributor to stress, exhaustion, and burnout. While there's something called attention deficit, I feel more people have the same symptoms from what we might call attention overload. If we only invest our energies in paying attention, we can end up feeling bankrupt until we discover natural resources of focusing from another level of mind. With effortless focus, we can upgrade our operating system to a type of focusing that people like musicians, athletes, and others have learned to do. This effortless focus, sometimes called being in the zone, or what we will explore later in this app as panoramic flow or awake loving flow. This upgraded way of focusing has proved remarkably beneficial for those who have had difficulty focusing. Particularly, I've found people with ADHD, people in recovery, right brain types, highly sensitive people, and just about anyone who gets zoned out, overwhelmed, or shut down, no matter how much they build the focus muscle of attention. Effortless mindfulness has been considered an advanced practice as it involves focusing from a different level of mind. Having taught both forms for many years, effortless mindfulness can be just as easy for beginners to learn as deliberate mindfulness. This glimpse is a way to focus from spacious, embodied awake awareness. You can try it here and then transition into learning to access it any time of the day and during any activity. I hope you enjoy. So begin by finding a comfortable way of sitting. Allow yourself to settle in. Feel a sense of gravity of your body resting on a chair or cushion. Notice sensations, thoughts, feelings, and then bring your attention to your breath as it rises and relaxes within your body at either your belly or your chest. Just noticing the breath at this one location, the felt sense. Notice the place you're focusing on as your breath rises by itself. And as you do, if your focus wanders, just gently bring it back to focus on this one area of your body in which breath is moving. As you notice this one specific area where your attention is focused, now simply shift from what you're focusing on to where you're focusing from. Where have I been watching my breath from? Notice you have to step back to sense or perceive what was the focuser. Notice that from this new mindful witness, you can perceive both the breath and the area in your head you were focusing from. Now, once again, shift to become aware of the location of the mindful witness and open back rather than pulling back the camera. Look back behind the mindful witness. Feel back to the open space you're aware from. Feel the location of the spacious awareness. Curiously open to see whether there's a boundary or a limit to this open awareness. And if not, continue to open to this already awake, vast awareness that's aware without your help. Feel this sense of boundless, timeless awareness that's equally outside and within. And notice your breath intimately from within and all around. Feel how the whole field of spacious and pervasive awareness of consciousness itself is interconnected and free, like a seamless ocean of awareness arising as your breath and your body, with no need to create a focuser or meditator. Just curiously, where am I aware from? Notice that equal feeling of awareness, being aware within and all around, so that you can be aware of both hands at the same time. Notice that you can be aware of your breath, your hands, and the sounds in the room. From this awareness, which isn't located in one point of view. Feel this panoramic, effortless focus that's embodied and interconnected. And if it's a new feeling, just familiarize yourself with it and enjoy this non-dual mindfulness that's aware of the content, the context of awareness, and the seamless evenness. Just continuing without effort to marinate without a meditator point of view, and settle into a feeling of okayness. It's equally aware of your whole body, and the spacious and pervasive awareness. Just notice that you could remain here and you could speak and respond from this embodied, open, effortless focus. So if your eyes are closed, just continue to allow each sense to be open and receptive as you open your eyes and are able in the next few minutes to remain at home in this effortless focus that's not focusing from your head or a mindful witness, but is interconnected and protected. And you can just transition into movement and return. Thanks for your openness. Thanks for listening. This podcast is offered freely. And instead of asking for a donation, I'd like to see if we can mutually support each other by asking you to try the free trial of our new app, Mindful Glimpses. You'll find it in the App Store or at lochkelly.org. There, we offer daily micro-meditations and in-depth programs to support a new way of awakening to the love and clarity that are already within you.